Denver Broncos head coach Sean Payton is higher on the team's wide receiver room than most people think. But when it comes to the NFL draft, he said they won't bypass a crystal just because they need a blender. We'll tell you what that means and much more on today's episode. Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, hi there, ho there. What's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. This is the place to be every single day, all year long. So thank you so much to everyone out there in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there. Thanks for making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And it's easy to become an everydayer if you're not yet one already. All you got to do is hit the subscribe to that follow button wherever you get your podcast, and you'll never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, co-host as well as the site expert over there at predominantlyorange.com.
Together, you get the best Broncos podcast and coverage out there on the entire podsphere here in Broncos Country. We heard from George Paton. We heard from Sean Payton in their annual pre-draft press conference. We'll go through and we'll talk about why Sean Payton believes the wide receiver room the team already has is in a good position, but they won't pass on going out there and bypassing a crystal, even if they need a blender at other positions. What does that even mean? We'll dive deep into that here, but we'll also dive into why the Broncos really believe that this year's running back and defensive line class contain a lot of valuable depth that could be good additions to the team here going forward. And then we'll obviously share our key takeaways from the Broncos pre-draft press conference, including some insight into why the Broncos hold top 30 visits. You'll get all that much more here on today's episode of the show. So, Sayre, look, we heard from George Paton. We heard from Sean Payton, obviously on Thursday afternoon for their pre-draft press conference, just a week away from all the action. And I felt like we got a lot of good information, a lot of good insight into their thought process on where the current team is at, how they build this team around Bo Nix. And part of that is it's multifaceted. Building a better team around Bo Nix or painting a better team, a picture about what that team is going to look like around Bo. It's not just on the offensive side of the ball. It's who you have on the defensive side of the ball. But as we've been talking about wide receiver, Sean Payton, confirmed that the team, they're very high on the wide receiver room that they currently have, but they're open to even adding to that room.
Yeah, I heard you ask a really great question in the presser, Cody, so shout out to you for that one. And obviously the wide receiver position is going to be one that's in focus because, well, last year it wasn't all that good for the Denver Broncos. It was rough. It was really rough in the early portion of the season where Marvin Mims wasn't contributing as much. Devaughn Vele had the ribs injury. Troy Franklin was inactive. I mean, the first half of the season, it was really bad. And I think that the Broncos, as you look at, and kind of just to, spoiler alert a little bit on the comment that Sean Payton made, he talked about the year 2 jump for certain guys. He talked about the year 2 jump for Marvin Mims and what they're excited about for Devaughn Vele and Troy Franklin. Feels like a little bit of that year 2 jump. I know this is not exactly right, but kind of started last year for Troy and Devaughn, I think in a big way. There was a clear before and after for those guys. And I can't help but wonder, as we're getting closer and closer to the NFL drafts, Cody, is this all smoke and mirrors from Sean Payton, or is he being genuine? Because even going back to his interview with Kay Adams, he seemed to be pretty content with he's been driving this bus for a few months now at this point of saying like, yeah, we like our young receivers. We like our young receivers. That has been a message that's been put out there almost as much as anything else this offseason.
Yeah, it could be smoke and mirrors. Sean had said, we're not going to bypass a crystal, so to speak, just because we need a blender. You can look at it, a multitude of ways there, but, more so like what is missing from that wide receiver room. And it seems like there are traits there that, guys like Devaughn Vele and Troy Franklin and even A.T. Perry, you didn't mention Perry specifically, but they believe they have some guys on the roster wide receiver that have some of the tools that they feel like will help the offense going even further. And Sean even went to the lengths of talking about and going back to when it was being asked about like adding weapons here for Bo Nix. It's not necessarily just a wide receiver. He said, I think the one thing is, and he said, I said this when we drafted Bo, was that the strongest allies you could have for a young quarterback is a strong running game and a good defense. Well, the Broncos on paper, they have a really good defense. Can they get that strong run game going? For context on the wide receiver position, Here's what Sean had to say during Thursday's pre-draft press conference.
We drafted 2 receivers last year, and the good news is after their first year, we really like their progress, and we certainly see, just take Marvin for a second, from year 1 to year 2. We saw the returnability, and we saw certainly glimpses in his rookie year. More production, obviously, in his second year. Troy, the same way, came in, picked things up. Courtland is such a positive role model and leader for these guys. Vele, and I haven't even hit on all of these guys, just relative to our overall depth. We're going to add numbers to the position when you look at it, what we take to training camp. Now, whether that's through the draft or free agency, but I would say we're happy with the 2 we selected a year ago, the 1 we selected 2 years ago, and the guys that are already here. And now, if one of those players arrives in a round where we're looking at it, and that's the trick to this. I mean, you can target guys sometimes. We're all guilty of really liking a player and then but let's not bypass the crystal for a blender if we need a blender.
Yeah, I think that's a good philosophy to take, right? In the NFL draft, you want to go after the best bang for your buck, right? That's what he's saying. We don't want to pass up the crystal just because you need a blender. Like, yeah, we have these needs on the roster right now, but this player is way higher on our board. And that's the dilemma that you oftentimes face with these draft classes. And so I don't know, Cody, even after listening to that statement that he just made, and the I don't know if you want to call it word vomit, that's not right, but similar type of deal there, it feels like he's trying to say, basically he's trying to make it seem like they're okay in that spot. And I don't know what that means. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if he's being genuine. I don't know if it's smoke and mirrors. And I think that's part of the achievement of that comment right there, is that you can't really tell what they want to do at that position based on what he said.
Yeah, and it also goes back to, like, let's go to that second year jump that, he was alluding to here once again. Maybe there is this level of confidence inside from Sean and from George, because, when they take a player initially, there's a vision, right? There's a year 1 vision, there's a year 2, there's a year 3 vision. Obviously, we'll get to a question a little bit later on that they answered about looking at guys who are like day 2, day 3 prospects potentially, but who can have an impact right away. What was the vision for a guy like Vele initially, like when they took him? Like, what is it 2 years from now? I don't know if their vision for Devaughn, in a sense, was necessarily, hey, we know that this guy's going to contribute for us right away here. Obviously, they liked his size. They liked, obviously, his features there. You got to see him early on in rookie mini camp, but they still had Tim Patrick on the roster at that point. They go through and they sign Josh Reynolds in free agency. So I don't think the expectation was, hey, this guy's going to play right away. And factor in Troy Franklin. They had a round 2 grade on him initially. He went in round number 3 to Denver. The way that they view the roster building standpoint, it's like, hey, if this happens right away, like organic, they're not going to force something, right? But they're going to try to work it into what they want to do. And I think certainly towards the end of the season, we saw that with Troy Franklin. We saw that with Devaughn Vele a little bit. And we certainly saw more of that come to fruition with Marvin Mims. Is there a confidence inside here from Sean Payton and the team that says, hey, we believe that year 2 jump is going to happen quicker than maybe we anticipate? Sometimes it could be a year 3 jump, but they think it's going to happen a little bit earlier. The Broncos, it would be a gamble, wouldn't you say, if they did have that approach and they didn't add to it? Like they said, they're going to add to it, whether it be free agency or the draft. But if it's kind of those are the primary guys, the guys that they end up adding are more so undrafted guys for training camp bodies, that would definitely be a gamble, in my opinion, here.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they really went into this draft saying, like, nah, we've got that at home. We're good at home with that. We don't need to get anything else. We don't need to get any better at that position. I just can't. That's hard for me to stomach at this point based on what we saw. Now, I get that there's progression, there's player progression, and the team does have specific vision for guys, and they want to get guys playing time. I get that. And so I just would be very surprised if they came away, or if they entered this draft process saying, yeah, we're good at wide receiver. Like, we don't need to look even as early as round 1. I know that was kind of a hot button issue there when you and I brought that up on a couple of episodes of the show ago, just really talking through that thought process there. There's a large sect of Broncos country that does believe the team is good with what we've got at home, right? With the young players that they've got already. So I'm interested to find out what come the NFL draft, if the Broncos actually believe that. Like, that will be one of the, you talk about diamonds and blenders. I mean, that'll be very interesting if they pass up on Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, or Tet McMillan. If they're all sitting there at 20 overall, if you pass on all of those guys, man, that will speak volumes to the players that you have on the roster.
Yeah, and how they feel about it too. And I think obviously, what Sean said had a glowing endorsement once again of Courtland Sutton, who we know those contract talks have gone really well and are expected to go really well. Courtland is expected to sign a deal sometime after the NFL draft. Timeline to be determined as to like when that actually happens, but all signs point to Courtland Sutton finishing his career as a member of the Denver Broncos, which I'm not opposed to. I like that a lot here. But Broncos country, we're not done yet. Sean Payton, George Paton shared their thoughts on what they believe is a deep running back class. What exactly are they looking for, and what stands out about these backs in this year's draft class? We'll break that down and much more in today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Upwork. And scaling your business requires the right experience at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts who are ready to help take your business to the next level.
And Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. So whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable.
Plus, it's important to find the right talent, and that's where Upwork comes in handy. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Plus, there's fast and easy hiring. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from.
So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and to grow your business today. This will be a running back focused draft for the Denver Broncos in 2025. But when, where, who, what, how are they going to figure this out? Because obviously they've talked about it plenty. We've talked about it plenty. We're all ready to find out who's going to be getting the rock from Bo Nix this year. So what did Sean Payton and George Paton have to say about that at their pre-draft presser? Well, we're going to tell you exactly that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And hey, Broncos country, appreciate every single one of you so much for tuning in every single day here on the show. If you're not already an everyday listener, go ahead, take a couple seconds, become one, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as over there on YouTube. Cody, let's talk about this because we've all been kind of eager to find out what's the philosophy on running backs in the draft. I know there was a question asked to Sean Payton, like, what do you think about this perception that you can't take first round running backs? How do you evaluate these guys as pass protectors? What do you think of this class overall? They got a lot of different angles of the running back position in this press conference.
Yeah, and look, I think, the more glaring one is something that you and I have been touching on really for a long time this offseason, which has kind of led into, obviously, if you caught our mock draft that we did for Locked On yesterday, our league-wide mock draft, we ended up with Omarion Hampton running back out of UNC. Knowing what we know now, it would have been Hampton, or we would have been okay with selecting Travion Henderson at number 20. But, they acknowledge that this is a very deep class at the running back position. They even threw an honorable mention out there that they also feel the same way about interior defensive line. But, there's different types of runners in this draft. That's what Sean Payton said. And, there are guys who, are downhill, 3 down back. There are guys who are also, I think, impact players who can run different routes. They can run to one side of the field, pivot back and get to the other. Like, we're talking about different levels of versatility and impact. So I think really they have options to choose from. Now, I think it boils down to, they said they are going to take a look at the running back position here. But I think so much depends on when does the run on running backs really start? And could the Broncos be the one team that really gets that going, right? Because we all anticipate Ashton Genty is probably going to be the first guy off the board at 6 overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. If that's the case, the next running back taken, I mean, realistically could come by the Broncos at number 20. That could begin the run on things.
It's very possible that could happen. And look, and I wouldn't be surprised because I know that not every running back coming out is Saquon Barkley, things like that. But man, it's definitely one of those situations to where you feel like teams are going to be coveting after that kind of guy, right? And especially after Genty came out and had that letter that he wrote to teams where he's like, hey, you saw what Saquon just did for the Eagles. You might as well draft the guy that nobody can tackle, right? I love that message being sent from him. Really hoping that he doesn't end up with the Raiders, right? Obviously, at this point, that's kind of the one major hope that we have. If he's not going to be a Bronco, just at least please don't let him go to the Raiders. But I think that, look, when you look at this running back class, George and Sean have both said it a number of times. It's one of the deepest positions in this draft. Does that mean that you don't have to take one early, though? That's my question here. Is like, if you feel like it's a deep position, wouldn't it make sense to say, hey, here's a guy that we believe is on a different tier from the depth of this draft, so we're going to take him early, as opposed to saying, no, we're going to get cute with it and we're going to try to find a guy in rounds 3 or 4. And Sean has done that before, right, with Alvin Kamara, but he had a better fail-safe back then than they currently have with the Denver Broncos.
Well, another thing too, and this is kind of my takeaway from sitting there and listening to Sean and George talk. They even talked about how the perception of this year's overall NFL draft is that your round 1 guys, in terms of the top heaviness of your positions available, blue chip prospects, things like that. They believe that at pick number 20, they can get a player who's graded that could go 10th overall in the draft. So they believe they're going to get a very high value player, even if they stay put at 20. Now, obviously, there's the possibility they could always move up if they wanted to. I know that they talked about the week before the draft, there's conversations. The week of the draft, there's more serious conversations, and other teams start to call you to see if they can move to where you're at as well. So there's a lot of options that the Broncos certainly have here. But I feel like they believe that there is a position, I don't know if they gave it away, that if they don't get it in round 1, that they surely can get it in round number 2. That's the vibe that I took away from their press conference. But our good friend Andrew Mason, I thought he asked a fantastic question about when you're going through and you're looking at day 2, day 3 prospects here, and you're trying to evaluate, can this guy play right away, or can he play 2 years, 3 years down the line? I felt like George Paton had a very interesting response on that, and I know it kind of ties into even some depth here at several positions.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a conversation about this. We were talking about some interior D linemen, and there's one that's ready to roll. We think he's ready to play next year, and then there's another one that, man, you may hit on him. And I think it's important that you go around the room, you talk to the assistant coaches, you talk to the scouts, and what's the vision for this player, year 1, year 2, and beyond. And so you have a lot of those discussions, and then you dig into the mental, and the makeup of these players, and do they have the makeup, if they are raw, to take that next step, the work ethic to take that next step. And so you dig into all these, you get into the analytics, and they help you break a tie, a cluster. And so that's kind of how we go about it.
I think that's a big reason why they brought in such a high volume of running backs, Cody. And I know we're going to talk more about that today as well, but those top 30 visits, the Broncos went heavy at the running back position. Also brought in a couple of guys that could be in consideration for, as what we've been talking about, this strength of the draft in terms of the depth at running back, D-line, tight end. They brought a number of those guys in for those pre-draft visits. And I think George right there even gave us some great insight as to what are they looking at in those guys that they feel like maybe, okay, we wait till day 2. We take this guy here, we feel like he can be something for you. And that's where maybe you do shift away from the running back in round 1 or bust sort of mentality, is to say there's multiple guys on day 2 that we know we can get, that we're certain are going to be there for us, that we feel can play right away. And they set themselves apart in whatever meeting we had. So I think that's a huge note from George Paton right there.
Well, and I think another thing as well, it just goes to the lengths of how this team has been built in the last couple of years with Sean, like the vision, the overhaul. You've gotten rid of a lot of key pieces. You've gotten rid of some big names in the last couple of years, and you've completely invested in the youth movement, whereas they were forced to go youth movement last year. But now they found themselves sitting in a position where it's like, wow, we've added this talent here in free agency. We've made our team better in this department. how can we continue to make this team better in return, which will help our quarterback and the offense get even better? It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with just adding to the offense. It's what pieces can we add that, make for favorable situations on, getting off the field on third down, not facing a long field when you do get the ball on the offensive side of the ball. Can we flip field position with special teams? Like, there's all these factors, and it's not just this one size fits all answer. It's multifaceted. And I think the way that this philosophy has been kind of created here with George Paton, Sean Payton, and their alignment here, the Broncos, I think at 20 are sitting in a position where if they want to move up and get a guy they feel is going to be a game changer for them, they certainly will do that. They're in a position where they don't necessarily have to reach for anything, but they believe that the player they're going to get is going to have an impact for them right away. And their depth options that they have with some of their other picks, they really believe that they have targets, they have exit plans and strategy. Like if a player that they really want is not there, they have, as what George said, they have exit strategies as well to try to figure out, okay, what do we do now if the player that we like is now off the board, is taken away? I'm excited to see how it's going to play out here, Sayre. It's going to be fun. I know that the Broncos, this draft class specifically, I know last year's was big. This one, I think there's going to be a lot of expectations on. There's going to be a lot of eyes on as to what does this mean about the future of the team. That I think is very exciting. But we're going to get some of our other key takeaways that we had from George and Sean's presser, including some insight from George as to why they have top 30 visits, what information they're looking for from certain prospects, and could it be a potential tactic by the Broncos that could get them some valuable intel on players they actually do like. We'll break that down and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. And did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn on any TV and turn it into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV.
And it's with the latest technology for elevated playing, right? With Wi-Fi 6 and 6E, auto low latency mode, advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds that you need in order to stay competitive. It's endless entertainment with 4K streaming. You can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. And it's always affordable and portable in terms of the gaming, where you can play high quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of having a console.
We love streaming things in 4K high quality. Your gaming experience should be the same exact thing with the 4K Fire TV stick.
So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation.
The fourth quarter of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is here, and it's the 2-minute warning. You got to drive downfield. Locked On Broncos is the place to be in clutch time scenarios for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. You get the best Broncos breakdown here on Locked On Broncos. Thanks to all the everydayers and first listeners out there in Broncos Country. Sayre, kind of wrapping up with some of our final takeaways from George and Sean Payton's press conference. A lot of good questions asked. We've dived into wide receiver. We've dived into running back. Overall, I felt like it was an interesting point because everyone always talks about it. I thought Mike Kliss asked a great question with this. Everyone wants to know what top 30 visits are for, right? They're like, are these top 30 players? Are these the players that they have ranked on their big board as their top 30? I think there's a misconception. I think some players certainly could be top players on their board. But George Paton kind of gave a little bit of a formula out saying that, we use these top 30 visits to acquire more information. Here's what he had to say.
Why we bring someone in on a top 30, or why we would, we talk to every player, all the all-star games, the combine, and then, we get through our meetings and maybe there's a player we just need a little more information on. Maybe can he learn what we're doing mentally? Maybe he has something off the field we want to address. Maybe it's someone who didn't go to the combine. We want to bring him in and get a physical so we can draft the player. Maybe we're just trying to recruit a college free agent. So there's a number of reasons why we're bringing players in, why we're talking with players. You can't have enough information. And so we're always searching for information, and especially the coaches, those Zooms are really, they're so important. And so, man, just the more information we can get, the better decisions we're going to make.
I think when you look at the group of players that was brought in on a top 30 visit, Cody, I think you can kind of glean, okay, so from those reasons that George Paton just gave, why do you bring these guys in on top 30 visits? When you bring in a high volume of running backs that are all supposed to go relatively within the same range of the draft, like we're talking Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins, Caleb Johnson, DJ Giddens, all of these guys that the Broncos could realistically consider in the first 2 rounds. We know how important that pre-draft meeting was last year between Sean Payton and Bo Nix and the coaches that they had, right? Obviously, that wasn't in Denver. They traveled to Oregon for that to kind of conceal that from the rest of the league. But I think you're getting a similar type of vibe from those guys there saying, hey, can you pick up this level of information? I don't think you're necessarily bringing all those guys that are in the same relative cluster of your potential board or players that you would realistically be considering for your running back 1 position, just to say, hey, we don't have a box checked off with this guy, or we don't. Remember, the Broncos didn't go to the Ohio State Pro Day. They want to get hands-on with these guys. And so I think that that's very interesting to me, what he said there about you want to see if they can handle the information that you're giving them, because that's why I think those running backs were brought in exactly. Can you handle what the coaches are throwing at you? Because you're expecting that guy to come start.
Well, look, it's the physical traits, it's the mental makeup. Those things are important attributes that NFL teams look at. And I think competent NFL franchises that are run well, I think those are of higher importance in terms of bringing up, do you have the physical traits? Are you a good teammate? Do you have that mental makeup that, hey, when things are going tougher, it's like you have a fumble. Like if you're a running back, you have a fumble. Can you shake that off? Because you're going to get your butt chewed out by Sean Payton. Can you handle that type of hard coaching? They want to know some of those things. And certainly it's just like, all right, hey, we saw this. We want to be sure. Also, a top 30 visit could be used to, hey, you played against this guy last year. Tell us a little bit about him. Like what happened there? We looked at, Hairston, obviously of Kentucky, the cornerback who obviously ran a very fast 40-yard dash, potential first round consideration. And you and I immediately after the press conference, I said, hey, Sayre, let's look up who did he face in terms of wide receivers. If you want to get some insight as to like what, if you're a corner and you want to learn about a wide receiver, what did you think of this guy here? Well, he faced off against Luther Burden. He's faced off against Matthew Golden. He saw a wide variety of Texas players like Gunnar Helm, Jaden Blue. So you get good insight there. But I felt like one of the more interesting things that was discussed that probably isn't being talked about enough, not necessarily a big deal, but the fact that they talked about outright that, hey, if there's an Oregon player that we're watching film on, John's called Bo right then and there and has asked about them. The involvement of saying, hey, we know that there is a player or there's someone here in this building that knows about this prospect because either they were there, they were a teammate, whatever it may be. It gives us an idea as to what we're going to be getting if we're truly interested in that guy. I found that to be interesting.
Yeah, I really like that note as well, where you're consulting the players that you have on your roster. Like you said, all types and all forms of information at this time of year are so valuable. I also found it interesting that Sean Payton brought up, Cody, that basically there's no prospect in a given draft that they would throw up on their board and say, we don't have a 3 degrees of separation from this guy, right? And that's important because you have coaches who know people that know these players. You're able to evaluate the personal side of things. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this offseason that made a great point about how the NIL at the college level now is going to make it much more complicated to find out how much guys want it at the NFL level, right? Do you really love the game? And I think that having coaches, having former teammates that know these guys that can speak to that fact, what this guy's like in the locker room. Does he love the game? What kind of way did he carry himself? I think all of that stuff can make or break potentially a player's standing in the draft room, because you might have, okay, this guy's an A+ in terms of athleticism. He's a B+ in terms of on field. We love the tape. We saw a great workout at the scouting combine, but then we went and asked Pat Surtain about how he was like in the Alabama locker room, and he said, I don't know about that. I don't think what would you do in that case?
Yeah.
If Surtain said that, would you be like, that's interesting. You might bring that guy in for a top 30, or you might just say, you know what? We're going to take him at his word. We're not going to draft this guy.
Having that personal, acknowledgement of being able to have guys that say, hey, I know what this guy's like in a locker room. This guy, he works hard in practice. He doesn't. That information is important because when you look at guys, you bring Pat Surtain's name up. I think that's a great example. You ask a guy like Pat, Pat Surtain, your thoughts on, a wide receiver he covered or, a former teammate there. That review is going to have more weight than I think necessarily. Let's say you have a practice squad guy who went to a school. I don't think that's going to hold as much weight as you would when you factor in your superstar players' feedback. That right there. And also you feel like you're including them into some potential big time discussions that allow them to say, hey, I maybe had a hand in that type of move that the team makes on draft night, or maybe leads to a free agency signing. I know there are a lot of Broncos players, including Bo Nix, were out there on the recruiting trail in free agency and really pitching some guys to come to Denver. DJ Jones was big on that train as well, obviously with Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw, which I think is a big reason why DJ decided to come back to the Mile High City. I think all the ties there, it's important to know that it's a relationship-laden business, really to its core. And that's where I think the Broncos, I'm glad that they're in a stable place now, because now I think it allows the conversation to be more nuanced. And now we can get a really good tell as to what they decide to do. Okay, was there something that they said beforehand that gave an indication of that? Like, then it allows us to decipher what's real, what's smokescreen, what's not. So I'm excited about it. Broncos Country, we are 1 week away from the NFL draft. Your boys, Sayre and Cody, we got you covered every single day for everything you need to know about the Denver Broncos. And for all you everydayers, next Monday, obviously to open things up, Sayre Bedinger, he's responsible for our mock draft. And did the pre-draft presser sway Sayre in any way, shape, or form to change maybe where he's going with the 20th overall pick? Tune into Monday's episode for our mock draft Monday recap. And then it's the build-up. Thursday, the NFL draft. I'll be in Dove Valley at Broncos headquarters there for the draft. You'll get coverage from Sayre and myself all week long here on Locked On Broncos. We'll see you then.